The gym was packed, buzzing with laughter, pride, and the nervous shuffle of caps and gowns. Flashing cameras lit up the bleachers like fireflies. Parents craned their necks, searching for their child among the sea of graduates. But one man sat, perfectly still. Grant, a retired black Marine with a face carved from years of service, occupied a lone plastic chair near the aisle. He wore no medals, no uniform, just a pressed shirt, polished shoes, and the silent weight of everything he had carried to get here. His eyes never left the stage. He was not looking around for applause. He was not waving or shouting. He was watching. His son, Jace, sitting 2 rows from the front, shoulders square, tassel brushing his cheek. Grant's presence was quiet, but it was undeniable. And then 2 security guards started moving toward him. They spoke in hushed voices at first, gesturing toward an empty row in the back. Something about seating protocol, about reserving space for families. Grant did not flinch. He just looked at them, calm, unbothered, like he had faced down worse in places with no air conditioning and a lot more firepower. Around them, people started noticing. A few parents fell silent. Jace, up front, turned slightly, just enough to realize something was wrong. That was when the first man stood, not a parent. Not a teacher, a Navy SEAL, then another, and another. One by one, 6 men in plain clothes rose quietly from scattered seats across the gym. They said nothing, did nothing, just stood. The guards froze, because what they saw in those men was not noise. It was a signal, and what happened next stopped the room cold. Long before the stadium lights, the folding chairs, and the ceremony programs, Grant Holloway lived a different kind of life, one built not on applause, but on discipline, silence, and sacrifice. He was 21 when he enlisted in the Marines. Raised by his grandmother in a 1-bedroom duplex outside Savannah, Georgia, Grant never talked much, but he listened. Listened when his grandma read the Psalms before bed. Listened when recruiters came to his high school cafeteria with brochures, promising purpose. And listened when his heart told him that if he stayed, he would never become the man he was meant to be. Boot camp carved the silence into steel. Afghanistan sharpened it. He saw things there no young man should see. Led men through heat, sand, and fear, and buried brothers beneath flags that never fluttered quite the same afterward. But through it all, Grant remained steady, not hard, not cold, just solid. The kind of man whose presence could hold a room, even if he never said a word. When he came back home, there were no parades, no cameras, just the sound of wheels on the tarmac, and the waiting arms of the only person who ever made him believe life could be more than war. Her name was Lila. She worked at a post office, wore her hair in curls she never bothered straightening, and had a smile that made him feel like peace was something he could hold in his hands. They married in the spring, no church, just a courthouse and 2 witnesses who did not need a reason to cry when they saw them. A year later, Jace was born. That day, Grant cried for the first time since the war, not because he was overwhelmed, but because he realized love was no longer a feeling. It was a duty. He raised his son the only way he knew how, with presence, not noise. He never shouted across football fields, never bragged at PTA meetings. But he showed up, every time. Whether it was parent-teacher conferences or midnight asthma scares, Grant was there, steady, reliable. The kind of father whose strength lived in what he did not say. Lila died when Jace was 12, breast cancer. Quick, cruel, unfair. She faded faster than anyone expected. And in the final weeks, she made Grant promise just one thing. "Do not let this make him hard," she whispered, her voice thin as tissue. "Let him feel things. Let him stay kind." And so, even as the grief hollowed him out, Grant became softer in the places that mattered. He learned to braid hair when Jace's little cousins came over. He taught himself to bake birthday cakes. He said, "I love you," even when it made his throat tighten. But he never spoke about the medals in the old shoebox under his bed. Never told Jace about the nights he laid awake with memories that refused to stay buried. He did not want to be remembered for battles. He wanted to be remembered for breakfasts, for school runs, for how he folded the laundry the way Lila used to, even if it never looked quite right. Jace grew into a thoughtful, bright, and grounded young man. He excelled in school, respected his teachers, and never gave Grant a reason to raise his voice. They shared a quiet understanding, built not on speeches, but on trust. Sometimes they would sit on the porch in silence, sipping lemonade as the sun set behind their small two-bedroom home, and it felt like church. Grant rarely talked about the war, and Jace never asked. But sometimes, in the silence, Jace would glance at the folded flag in the living room bookshelf and wonder just how much weight his father had carried alone. And Grant? He would glance at his son and see Lila's eyes. He would remember the promise he made and feel a deep, unshakable pride. Pride not in what he had endured, but in what he had preserved. That morning, before the graduation, Grant laid out his old, black suit, the one he wore to Lila's funeral, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. He polished his shoes, adjusted his tie in the mirror without asking for help, and placed a single photo in his inner jacket pocket. It was the picture Lila loved the most, baby Jace in her arms, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. He kissed the edges once. Just once. And as he sat alone in that plastic folding chair near the back of the gymnasium, surrounded by proud families and bursting joy, Grant was not thinking about what he had lost. He was thinking about what he had protected and what he was about to witness walk across that stage. The gymnasium at Langston High buzzed with the electric murmur of anticipation. Folding chairs, stretched in neat rows across the polished hardwood floor, their metallic legs scraping lightly as families shuffled to find the best view. The school's maroon and gold banners hung proudly from the rafters, trembling with the vibrations of the crowd. Somewhere near the back, a band tuned instruments with scattered bleats of brass and soft rolls of drums. Outside, the Georgia sun pressed hard against the brick walls, but inside, the air was cool and thick with emotion. Mothers fanned themselves with ceremony programs. Fathers adjusted their phones, trying to lock in the perfect angle. Grandparents dabbed at teary eyes before the first name was even called. Grant sat quietly, 3 rows from the back, alone. He wore his black suit, perfectly pressed, no decorations, no pins, just a simple man in a simple seat, hands folded gently, in his lap. His shoes, polished to a soft shine, did not tap. His expression, calm and unreadable, scanned the stage, then settled on the side door where he knew the graduates would soon enter. In his breast pocket, the photo remained. Lila and Jace. Always close, and above all the noise, the clamor, and the swelling pride of 100 families. He listened for one thing, his son's name. Backstage, Jace stood in line with the other graduates, his cap slightly tilted and his fingers tracing the edge of his honor cord. The long maroon gown felt heavier than he had expected. Maybe it was the weight of years, or maybe it was the pressure of the moment. He glanced at the crowd through a narrow slit between the curtains. He could not see his father, but he knew he was out there. Grant never missed anything important, never raised his voice, never demanded the spotlight. But he showed up, every time. In a world where people liked to post about love more than they practiced it, Jace knew his father's presence meant everything. "Yo, Jace," a classmate whispered, elbowing him. "You ready, man?" He smiled, tight-lipped. "Yeah, just wish Mom could see this." The other boy nodded respectfully, said nothing. The principal tapped the microphone. It gave a short shriek before falling silent. The lights dimmed, the crowd hushed. A slow version of Pomp and Circumstance began to play, and the doors opened. The graduates began to file in, one by one. Jace's heart thumped in rhythm with the music. His eyes scanned the crowd, finally landing on that familiar black suit. Third row from the back. Still. Calm. His father looked right at him. They did not wave. They never needed to. Then, without warning, movement. Two uniformed school security officers began walking down the left aisle. At first, no one paid them any attention. They moved quickly, eyes locked on something specific. It was Grant. They stopped just beside him. One of them leaned in and said something under his breath. Grant blinked. His hands were still folded. He turned his head slightly, said something softly, and looked back toward the stage. But the taller guard stepped. Closer. His voice this time was loud enough to break through the music. "Sir, we need you to come with us." Chairs creaked nearby. Whispers flickered like sparks. Grant turned again, calmly. "Is there a reason?" The shorter officer stiffened. There was a complaint. "You are making some parents uncomfortable." That word, uncomfortable. It hung in the air like smoke. A woman 2 rows up adjusted her purse and turned away. A man behind Grant pulled his daughter closer. No one said a word. The music played on. From the stage, Jace froze mid-step. His eyes locked on the 2 officers now motioning for his father to stand. Grant remained seated, his back straight, his hands still. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. But his silence was louder than anything else in the room. From all corners of the gym, the mood shifted. You could feel it in the way people suddenly stopped clapping, in the nervous coughs, the sideways glances, the unwillingness to intervene. Jace could barely breathe. His gown felt suffocating. His stomach turned. This was supposed to be the proudest moment of their lives, and they were trying to take it away. One of the guards touched Grant's shoulder. That was when it happened. Something shifted in the room. The air changed, and what came next would silence the entire gymnasium. The guard's hand rested on Grant's shoulder for only a moment, but that moment was long enough for the tension to snap, long enough for a group of men seated 4 rows away to exchange a glance that said everything. No words, just one shared look. Then the first man stood up. He was broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed beard and sharp eyes that missed nothing. His dark navy suit could not hide the posture, rigid, precise, trained. He adjusted his jacket slightly and turned toward Grant. Then the second one rose, then a third, then a fourth, and then the 5th. 5 men. Different backgrounds, different skin tones. One thing in common, the way they carried themselves, purpose in every motion, weight behind every breath. The kind of presence that does not need to announce itself. You feel it. They moved without hurry, stepping into the aisle beside Grant. Not aggressive, not loud, just there. Anchored. The taller guard noticed first. He shifted uneasily and dropped his hand. "What is this about?" he asked, his voice losing its earlier edge. The first man, the one with the beard, met his eyes. "That man right there," he said quietly, pointing to Grant. "Served 22 years. United States. Marine Corps, 2 combat tours, Bronze Star, lost his wife, raised a good man by himself. He has earned the right to sit here." His voice was even, calm. Not a challenge, a statement. Grant remained seated, unmoved. His eyes flicked from the SEALs to the guards, then back to the stage. He had not asked for this. He never would. But they had come anyway. The guards hesitated, now uncertain. The rules were suddenly unclear. There was no protocol for this. No training manual covered what to do when 5 Navy SEALs stood like a wall around a man who had done nothing but sit in silence and love his son. The crowd, which had watched with downcast eyes moments before, was now fully alert. Some were leaning forward. A few were already pulling out their phones, not to record but to look, to truly see. Whispers traveled fast. Who are they? Did he really say Marine Corps? Wait, I recognize that one, I think. On stage, the principal paused mid-sentence as she announced another graduate's name. She looked toward the commotion, her brows knitting. Even the band faltered, the music thinning. One of the SEALs, a tall black man with a gray buzz cut, nodded toward Grant, then turned his gaze slowly across the audience. People lowered their eyes. A few looked ashamed. No one moved. Grant finally spoke, not to the guards, but to the men standing around him. "I do not want any trouble," he said. The bearded SEAL gave a half smile. "We know, but you deserve peace and respect." The lead guard stepped back. The tension in his shoulders slipped just slightly. "We were told—" "I do not care what you were told," the gray-haired SEAL interrupted. "What you should be seeing is a father trying to watch his son graduate. Let him." Silence blanketed the gymnasium like fog. Then someone in the back, no one saw who, started clapping. Soft. Hesitant. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the sound spread, filling every corner of the room. Not wild applause. Not chaos. Just slow, respectful clapping. Not for drama, but for dignity. The principal, still standing at the microphone, took a moment to absorb what she was seeing. Then she spoke clearly, into the mic. "Jace Thompson," she said. "Honors. Graduate. Class of 2025. And Jace walked forward, his chin high, his back straight. He did not look at the crowd. He did not wave. He looked straight at his father, still seated, surrounded now by a silent wall of honor, and gave a single nod. Grant blinked once. Nothing more. But in that small gesture, everything was said. The guards slowly returned to the side of the gym, unsure of what had just happened, but understanding enough to stay out of it now, and the ceremony continued. But the air had changed. The gym no longer buzzed with casual pride and predictable celebration. It held something heavier, something earned. He did not need their approval, but he had their respect. Jace stood just off stage, diploma in hand, heart pounding in his chest. But not because of nerves. Because of what had just unfolded. Because of what his father had just endured. Grant sat back down, quiet as ever. Unshaken. Unapologetic. The 5 SEALs had remained standing, flanking his seat with military stillness. Not a word spoken, not a gesture wasted. Just presence. Silent, commanding, undeniable. The ceremony rolled forward, name after name echoing through the auditorium, but everyone was still thinking about what they had witnessed. The tension had melted, but something stronger had taken its place. Reverence. Then came a pause. A name appeared on the screen behind the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the principal announced, voice steady. "We would like to take a moment to recognize one more guest today, not a student, but someone whose service, sacrifice, and character remind us all of the values this school claims to uphold." She adjusted the mic. "Mr. Grant Thompson, would you please join us on stage?" A hush swept the room. Jace's breath caught. He looked toward his father. For a moment, he wondered if Grant would stand at all. Grant's jaw tightened slightly. Not out of pride, but out of instinct. His first reaction to any kind of spotlight was always resistance. He was not built for ceremonies. He had spent most of his life doing things no one ever clapped for. But then the 5 SEALs turned to him, not pushing, not encouraging, just waiting, like brothers. And Grant stood. It was not dramatic. It was not rushed, just steady. He adjusted the cuffs of his jacket, as if preparing for a different kind of battle. One fought with grace. The room watched him climb each step to the stage. Step by step, A storm swirled inside him. Memories, echoes, a helicopter in Iraq, a letter from home written in his wife's handwriting, a folded flag. The night he learned he would raise Jace alone, the years of scraped knees and honor roll certificates, of pretending he was not afraid, of hiding tears behind locked bathroom doors because he could not afford to let his son see. A crack in the armor, all of it, rising now like a tide in his chest. He reached the podium. He did not speak. He did not need to. The principal handed him a small plaque. Nothing elaborate, just a simple piece of wood and brass engraved with his name. It read, "With honor and gratitude, for service, sacrifice, and fatherhood." He took it with both hands, staring at the engraving for a long moment. Then, from below, it started. One clap. From the front row, the bearded seal, then another, and another, 5 seals, 5 pairs of hands, clapping in perfect rhythm. The sound echoed through the hall like a slow, rolling wave, deliberate, measured, sacred. Others began to join, but no one clapped faster. They matched the seals, beat for beat, unified, respectful. No one cheered, no one whistled. No one stood, because this was not a celebration. This was a salute. Grant turned his head, scanning the crowd. He did not smile. He did not nod. He looked for one person. Jace. Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, Grant's eyes glistened. Jace did not say anything. He did not need to. The diploma in his hand was not the most important thing he would walk away with that day. The most important thing stood at the center of that stage, a man who had spent his life giving more than he ever asked for, a Marine father. A silent storm. Grant stepped down from the stage the same way he had stepped onto it. Slow, steady, grounded. As he walked past the seals, each one offered a subtle nod. Not showy. Just quiet acknowledgement, the kind exchanged between those who have seen life from the same trench. He returned to his seat without fanfare. But something had shifted. Not just in the room, in him. For the first time in a long time, Grant felt seen, not for what he had done on the battlefield, but for who he had been every single day since. A man who kept showing up. Real strength does not shout. The sun had dipped just low enough to cast long shadows across the parking lot. The crowd from the auditorium was thinning, handshakes, photos, laughter echoing in the distance. But off to the side, away from the noise, Grant stood with his hands in his pockets, leaning against an old oak tree that had probably been there, longer than the school itself. Jace approached slowly, his graduation cap now tucked under his arm. He did not say anything at first, neither did his father. Just silence. The kind that lives between two people who have always spoken more in action than in words. Finally, Jace broke it. "You good?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Grant nodded once. "You looked sharp up there," Jace smirked. "Thanks. You stole the show, though." Grant's lips lifted just a bit. Not quite a smile, but close. Then he looked down at the ground and asked, almost offhand, "Why did you not say anything?" Jace blinked. "What do you mean?" Grant met his eyes. "When they came up to me, the guards, you just stood there. Why did you not say anything?" It was not an accusation, not even disappointment. Just a question. Plain and honest. Jace took a breath. Thought back to that moment. The tension, the humiliation, the fear that he would have to choose between walking across the stage or walking out with his father. He looked down, a little ashamed. "I did not know what to do. I was afraid if I said something it would make it worse." Grant nodded again. "That is all right." But Jace stepped closer. "No, it is not. I should have spoken up." Grant paused, then said quietly, "Sometimes Silence speaks louder than words. Jace frowned. What do you mean? Grant looked out toward the open lawn, where a few students were taking selfies with their friends. When I was in Afghanistan, he said, there was a mission that went sideways. We were outnumbered, outgunned, pinned down in a village that was not even on the map. We were not sure if we were going to make it out. He shifted his stance, not for drama, just memory. And in that moment, no one yelled, no one gave speeches, just quiet men, doing what needed to be done. Every movement meant something, every second counted. Silence was not weakness, it was discipline, it was respect. Jace listened, fully still now. Those SEALs today, they knew that. They did not need to push anyone around. They just stood there, and the whole room shifted. He turned back to his son. You did not shout. You did not argue. You stood in your truth. That is enough. Jace's throat tightened. He had always wanted to make his father proud, but had rarely heard it aloud. Then Grant reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and pulled out a small photo. The corners were worn, the ink a little faded. It was a picture of 3 people. A young Grant, in uniform. A woman, his wife, smiling, radiant, and a baby in her arms. Jace. This was taken the day before I deployed the last time, Grant said softly. Your mom, she made me promise I would come back. But more than that, she made me promise I would raise you to be better than me. Jace swallowed hard. You did. Grant nodded. She would be proud of you. Of the man you are becoming. He handed the photo to Jace. There was a long beat of quiet. Then Jace looked back at him. The SEALs. Did you know them? Grant exhaled slowly. One of them, the one with the beard. We were in the same unit once. Different branches, but same mission. I saved his life. He saved mine. We never talked about it. We just knew. Jace looked stunned. And he just showed up, after all these years? Grant shrugged. That is how brothers work. You do not always call. But when it matters, they come. Jace looked at the photo again, then back at his father. I want to be that kind of man, he said quietly. Grant put a hand on his shoulder. You already are. They stood there a moment longer. No crowd, no cameras, just the 2 of them. A veteran and his legacy. A boy becoming a man, under the quiet strength of his father's shadow. Then, without fanfare, Grant said, Come on, let's get out of here. They walked side by side toward the car, the photo tucked safely into Jace's pocket. As they disappeared into the fading sunlight, a simple truth lingered in the air behind them. Real strength does not shout. It stands. You do not have to. Shout to be heard. The school building faded into the distance behind them, brick walls slowly swallowed by the night. Grant drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting calmly on his knee. Jace sat beside him, quiet, still holding the photograph. For a while, neither spoke. The windows were cracked open. Summer air flowed through, soft, warm, easy. It smelled of fresh-cut grass and pavement still holding onto the day's heat. Then, Grant asked, Hungry? Jace chuckled. Always. A few turns later, they pulled into a small parking lot. Familiar, humble. A red and yellow sign glowed softly in the dark. Waffle House. The same place they used to go after baseball games. And long weekends together. Not for the food, but for the peace. For the space it gave them to just be. Inside, it looked the same. Sticky counters, faded booths, a waitress with tired eyes and a kind smile. They sat at the corner booth, the one they had claimed as theirs years ago. Jace ordered a bacon waffle like he always did as a kid. Grant ordered black coffee and eggs, and when the plates arrived, hot and simple, They ate without ceremony. Halfway through the meal, Jace said, "You know, I think that moment today is going to stay with me for the rest of my life." Grant looked up but said nothing. I kept thinking. Someone else would say something. Someone older, louder, braver. But no one did. Then those guys stood up, and it changed everything. Without a single word, he paused. That is the kind of man I want to be. Grant smiled softly, took a sip of his coffee, then said, "You do not have to raise your voice to be heard. You just have to know who you are and carry that with you. That is enough." Jace nodded slowly. The noise of the world always told him to speak up, shout louder, prove something. But maybe real power came from not needing to. Maybe the loudest men were the ones who had not yet learned how to be still. They finished their meal, paid the check, walked back to the car in silence. But the silence was not empty. It was full of everything that had been said and everything that did not need to be. As they pulled out onto the road, Jace looked over. "Thanks, Dad." Grant glanced his way. "For what?" Jace shrugged, smiling. "For being exactly who you are." The night closed gently around them. Two men, bonded by blood, service, loss, and unspoken understanding, disappearing into the quiet. And somewhere behind that moment, a truth remained. True strength is not in shouting. It is in standing, and when you stand long enough, the world cannot help but listen.